evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 11th, 2020 Zoning Board of Appeals for the Village of Ossning meeting. Remember that this is a public hearing that is quasi-judicial. We ask that no one speaks in the audience. If you have something or you need to say or discuss, we ask that you please take it outside of the room and down the hall toward the front door. If you talk outside of these two doors, your conversation will echo back into the room and we can hear what you say. When you come up before the board, you must provide your name and address. Remember, you are addressing the board. You are not speaking to an applicant or their representative. Applicants and representatives, please remember, you are addressing the board. So let's start. It's all continuing business of the board. ZBA 0719 38 James Street. Is anyone here to speak on that matter? Please come up and use the mic.
Hello, I'm Louis Saavedra, reside at 38 James Street, Ossning, New York. See, I submitted the plans for the variances, and by the time the building was put down, it looks like it's a little too close now. And asking for an adjustment for the variance.
So this is,
Okay, basically, Mr. Saavedra was granted a variance after he put the foundation in for the garage. The foundation survey came in with the dimensions, and he required a variance because he was within the 5 feet allowance. And then when the construction of the building was put on the foundation, we asked for an as-built survey, and there was a slight difference where it's slightly closer, a few inches closer than the original foundation survey. So he's here today to get an adjustment on his variance that was granted at the last meeting.
so is the building bigger than the foundation? The building sits outside of the foundation?
It's possible that when you put a building on top of it, by the time you put all the siding and so forth, it can extend a few inches past the foundation.
Right.
Is there anyone else here to speak on this matter?
No.
Joe, you recommended last time, right, that we accept it? Or am I?
Well, the board voted in favor of granting the variance the last time.
Okay.
Right.
So
The
it's-
variance of the original,
Right.
so the question is, do we grant the variance now that there's a building on top of the slab that's slightly over?
The difference is, it's a matter of a few inches.
Right.
It's just that the code doesn't allow for, it doesn't provide an allowance acceptance. It has to be
Right, so we have,
granted
so,
again.
do we need a motion?
Yes.
I move that we accept the new variance.
Can I get a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion granted.
Thank you.
Have a good night, sir.
You too, thank you.
On to ZBA number 1519, 6 Narragansett. Is there anyone here to speak on that matter?
Yes, Madam Chair. Madam Chairman, members of the board, my name is Mark Malone. This is Emmanuel Angio. It's Mr. Angio's property. He's asked me, I'm a friend of the family, and he's asked me if I would help him present this matter to you. In short, why are we here? For an area variance to allow parking vehicles in the front yard of his property at 6 Narragansett Avenue. Why do we need the variance? As you know, Narragansett Avenue has no parking on it. So the location of the Angio's house on the property and the narrow width of their driveway make it impossible for the Angios and their tenants, they have tenants, it's a legal two-family house, to have unobstructed access from Narragansett without a front yard parking variance. I have some pictures that I'll show in a minute. I'm hoping there are 4 documents that we filed. We filed an application, we filed a supplement application with the legal factors that the board must consider and evidence along with exhibits showing why I believe we're entitled to a variance. We have filed a letter in support, and we have also filed a second supplement. We were here in September. There were some questions that the board had. We did a FOIL request, we did discovery, and we've come up with several things that are important for this board to view. Just quickly, the Anjo family has lived in Indian Village in Ossining since about 2005. His mom and dad are here, and his wife. Mr. Anjo is a police officer with the Village of Ossining. His wife is a teacher at St. Augustine's. You know, just in a little background, the village has had a long history of encouraging and welcoming its employees, particularly emergency services workers like Mr. Anjo, to reside in the village. This tradition promotes the familiarity and community and fosters a positive relationship with the people within the community. In February of 2019, Mr. Anjo and his wife purchased a legal two-family house in the Village of Ossining at 6 Narragansett Avenue. They live there with their infant son on the ground floor. A husband, wife, and their children live in the upstairs dwelling, and that husband is a nurse, so he's in essence a first responder as well. If you look at, if you have the supplement, I don't know if you have the supplement in front of you.
The new board members may not have everything, they may have the supplement.
Jim, you sent me all that.
Yeah.
I read all of it. Yeah.
It might be
Yeah.
beneficial, since these are mostly new board members, to kind of walk them through, kind of from.
Okay, surely we can do that. So with regard to, and it's sort of difficult because I'll refer to some exhibits, and there are exhibits in that first supplement. But the first one, Exhibit A, Mr. Anjo went to his neighbors and asked if any of them had objections to the front yard parking variance. None did, and we've submitted consents. The second is, Exhibit B is a list of photos of the house that sort of give you the context.
Right there.
You can see that there's a driveway and there's a bump out on the house. The bump out, the difference between the bump out and the chain link fence on the other side is less than 14 feet. So you have a two-family house, you have two first responders. The issue was if somebody parks in the back of that bump, such as Mr. Anjo and his wife, and the tenants parked in back of that driveway, that you wouldn't be able to get out. He would not be able to get out.
And in doing so, just to explain that a little bit further, if I was to move a car out to the street, there's no street parking.
Right.
So I can't leave an unattended car in the middle of Narragansett while I get the other car.
You're a police officer, so
Yes, sir.
you are rotating shifts, right?
Here in Ossining, we're steady shifts, but
You're
there's
steady
always,
shifts.
always that possibility.
But the nurse at the hospital is on a different shift than you.
Absolutely.
So you'd end up getting woken in the middle of the night after a long day to move cars.
Even if we get a call in, like,
Right,
they-
and you gotta call in. So
to
that's
go to
the
work.
issue. The issue is you've got first responders who have to wake up the other first responders to move cars around like a Rubik's Cube of vehicles.
basically.
Got it, okay. Now I understand.
If I could approach, I have another photo that might be helpful. I believe it was submitted last time, but I don't know if it made it into the record.
Which one is that?
It shows the bump out, and it shows how narrow
Yeah,
that
okay.
driveway is at that section.
Yeah, that's what they can't get past.
Correct.
Got it. Question, when the cars are parked where you want to park them, are they visible to the street and to the neighbors?
Excellent question. What we've done, in this case, Mr. Anjo has placed screening. You can see it in the picture. I
One of the
believe.
photos, there's pine trees in the front that are planted.
Okay, so they'll grow in and.
They'll grow in and cover the house.
This
That's,
was
oh, that's what that
the
is. Okay, thank you,
screening.
got it.
And actually, this was taken probably about 9 months ago. If you go past it now,
Yeah, they're a
the
little bit
screening
bigger.
has filled in. So
Right.
it's very difficult from the street to actually see a car parked here. You can see the car
Yes.
parked here now because of the
And
angle.
shortly, it'll be blocked altogether, so
Yeah,
it doesn't,
yeah,
it doesn't,
absolutely. It'll grow in.
it doesn't have a detriment to the curb value.
I like a curb appeal, so
Yeah.
they're,
All right,
they'll grow in nicely.
just being clear. Thank you.
No problem.
There's another exhibit, I believe that it was up, it's the survey that we had, and it sort of shows you exactly where we're going to put these spaces. It shows you the space where a significant amount from the street, and then we've also done the screening. So to answer your question, it's not as easy to see as in many other places. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. And you can see where we intend to put the parking space. There's one parking space that we'd like to put in front of that bump out that we showed, and then there's another that goes in the front. You can see,
It's not that exhibit. There's another one that's got
Better
it drawn
pictures.
in, yeah.
You have another.
yeah, it's I believe it's Exhibit C of the first supplement that we submitted. I'd just like to run through the factors that you must consider, the statutory factors that the board must consider, and what we've proposed to show you that there's evidence that the variance should be granted. The first one is whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the variance. And there are several houses we've, again, we're at a disadvantage because the first supplement is not up there. We've shown a number of houses in the area in which front yard parking, the people have to park in their front yards. The reason being, there's no parking on the street.
And if I may add, if I may draw your attention to 48 Narragansett, same street, multifamily house, 2-car garage, 2 parkings outside. They granted the front yard variance for that house. So it's a very similar point of circumstances.
I don't know that it's very similar. You have to decide every
Case
case on the
separate.
fact.
Well, you'll see, we did our discovery, and Mr. Kahan responded to the discovery. There are 10 instances in the last several years in which front yard parking variances were granted. In 3 of those cases, the village went so far as to grant licenses for these people to park actually on village property. So there are 10 cases altogether where these front yard variants have been granted, and 3 cases where the village has given a license to the person parking in the front to be on village property. But we'll get to the second supplement in just a second. The Exhibit D is an exhibit, it's a picture of actually something very similar to Mr. Anjo's situation. That's on Upper Croton Avenue. The car is parked in front. If you look at it, they have a gravel sort of driveway, and they have a very narrow driveway, which is the reason that they're parking their car in front. If you look at Exhibit E, it's probably about a 4 or 5 block radius from where Mr. Anjo lives. There are a number of instances in which front yard parking, in which the homeowners have to park in their front yard. They have driveways, but they park in their front yard. In several of these instances, what they've done is they've cut back their front yard, they've asphalted it, and then they park in the front yard on that asphalt. And we took numerous pictures of that. Ramapo, Pecanico, as I said, probably a 3 or 4 block radius from where Mr. Anjo lives, where the same thing is done. So we go back to the detriment to the neighborhood. So you have many instances. Obviously, parking in the front yard has not been a detriment to the neighborhood. It's not going to change the character of the neighborhood because most of the people who live on these streets where there are no parking have 1 or more cars parked in their front yard. The second factor that you must consider, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. And we've submitted to you the supplement and indicated that the only reasonable way for the Anjos and the tenants to have unfettered means of vehicle access to and from the house is to allow the tenants to park in the front. Again, you have a situation where you have first responders. You can't be juggling the cars around. The third factor that we've submitted, whether the requested variance is substantial. And we've indicated on village streets where on-street parking is prohibited, it's not uncommon for the homeowners of single or two-family residences to park cars in the front yard. Again, we go back to the exhibits that were presented with the pictures. The next factor, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. Again, as noted, the front yard parking spaces for residents that front on village streets on which their parking, the on-street parking is prohibited, is not uncommon. The next factor, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration can be relevant. We've indicated that the residence is a legal two-family residence. It's an old building. It was built in the early 1900s, I believe 1900 actually. The lots tended to be small at that point. The location of the property, coupled with the narrow width of the existing driveway, make it impossible to provide the homeowner and a tenant with off-street, unobstructed vehicle access to and from the property. So those are the factors that you must consider, and we believe we presented substantial evidence on each of those factors to help you decide that. Now, the second thing is the second supplement. What we did was we were here in September. At the time, the chairwoman had some questions about our application. We did a FOIL request. Mr. Kahan responded to the FOIL request. The first attachment to our supplement is a memo from Mr. Agostinelli in which he stated that both he and Tracy Corbett, who was the former Ossining Director of Planning and Development, agreed that Mr. Anjo's request for a variance allowing him to create 2 parking spaces in the front yard of his property was, quote, acceptable. Mr. Agostinelli stated, Tracy and I felt that the 2 spaces were not considered tandem parking and therefore was considered acceptable to allow independent entrance and exiting from the property. That was sent to Mr. Kahan and the other members of the board. The next thing, as one of you gentlemen brought up, is the precedent that's been set. As I indicated, and it's set forth in our second supplement, there were 10 cases in the last several years in which front yard parking variance was granted. Now, there's a host of cars that are parked in their front yard. I don't know whether those have been granted variances or whether people are just doing it. And quite honestly, if you didn't know the ZBA, if you didn't know the code, you might never know that the code prevents front yard parking. It's one of those things that, you know, if you're a homeowner, and particularly if you have a 2-family house, you may look and say, what's the reasonable solution to my problem? Okay, let me create something in the front yard so that the tenants or I can park. So there are 10 instances in which this board has granted front yard parking variances. As I said, 3 of them go way beyond just granting the front yard parking variances. They go and create a right on village property for these people to park. And those are listed in that second supplement. The first 3 with names of the property, when they were granted, how the board voted. They were all unanimous, by the way. And then there's 7 instances in which the ZBA granted the front yard parking variances. Those didn't involve actually going the additional step in providing them with property rights to park on that property. There was one other, the former chairwoman had one other issue. She asked about the garage, if they could park in the garage. That doesn't really remedy the problem. The problem is that little jut out that prevents any more than 1 car from ingress and egress. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, it's a 1900s building, and that garage was built at the same time. If you measure it, there's no way that an SUV can get in there. Let's say a regular car is probably 6.5 feet wide.
My wife's car doesn't fit there. It sticks out.
And my guess is the height is not where you need it to be either. So in response to the chairwoman's, the previous chairwoman's request, we did do the measurements. There's no way that basically normal cars anymore fit in that garage. But even if they did, it still does not alleviate the problem for which we are seeking the variance.
There's a couple of things that I need to add to all of this. First, with regard to the information that was saying, indicated here that the building inspector said that this was considered acceptable. The question that was asked by the previous chairwoman was, does the applicant need a variance also for tandem parking? And it says specifically in here referring to tandem parking, in the quote. And what was answered was, is the way the parking spaces are being laid out in the front yard, that it wasn't considered tandem parking because one is not in front of the other.
Right.
There are two independent spaces. But the applicant does need a variance for parking in the front yard. So this was only a response to a question if an additional variance was needed.
Got it.
But it's been taken out of context,
Yeah.
the way it's being presented.
Okay.
Besides that, how this applicant got in front of the zoning board to begin with was because the building department received complaints from the public about parking going on at this property in the front yard. And the applicant was given a violation from the building department for parking in the front yard and is presently waiting in the town court because it wasn't rectified within the 30 days when you get an order to remedy it. Since the time he's been in front of the zoning board, he was given notices from Stuart Kahan to not continue to park in these spaces and proceeds to continue to do so. So subsequently, additional violations have been issued. Okay.
I just want to correct one thing. Well, first of all, we did a FOIL request for all documents. There was nothing in there about public making any type of complaint about this. The second thing is the tenant apparently parked at some point in one of the spaces where the jut out is. We asked her if she could park in the driveway. Mr. Anjo is now parking elsewhere on someone else's property and walking to his house. So as far as the explanation about the acceptability of this, quite honestly, I would have thought that if there was some objection to this parking configuration, that would have been made clear in this memo which was sent to the board.
Okay. As for the complaint, okay, the building department doesn't put in their own complaints, and many times people can file complaints and they're allowed to be anonymous. So if you look at the complaint, it probably, if it doesn't have an individual's name on it, it's not required to have one. They can file an anonymous complaint, and we do not give up who the person is who makes the complaint for safety reasons, because it can create issues between neighbors. So the complaint comes in, and we go out, we look at it, whether it's anonymous, whether it's a person who puts their name on it, and if it's visualized by the building department for parking in the front yard, you're going to be issued a violation. Other things is, at the meeting that we had the last time the applicant was here, they brought in a whole bunch of photos indicating about the other properties that have parking in the front yard. Since then, that basically by doing so, it's the same as giving us information that there's people parking in the front yard and the building department investigates these properties. Since then, the parking spaces on Ramapo and there's one on Mechanico who have created parking spaces with blacktop in the front yard of their, off the sidewalk or off the street, is actually on the village's right-of-way. Recently, those applicants applied, were given violations for these spaces because there was no record of any granting of these parking spaces there. At the last month's meeting in front of the Board of Trustees, the Board of Trustees were asked if they were entertaining allowing to have a signed agreement to allow them to continue to have their parking on the village's property, and it was denied. So each one of these properties owners have violations. They're currently in front of the town court. The Board of Trustees denied, and now the remedy is that they have to all remove them all. The other parking that has been on people in the front lawn also were given violations, and most of them actually complied and stopped parking in their front yards.
Well, I can tell you, if you go around Indian Village, you can see cars parked in their front yard.
And
all the time.
furthermore, the pictures I submitted, there's a question there that says, how is this gonna change the character of the neighborhood?
Right, it's not submitted to
I went
tell
around
on
and I said
people.
it's not, because it's a common practice in Ossining. I mean, I spend more times in the streets in Ossining than anybody in this room, and I'm pretty sure of that, and I see it. And I was attempting to answer that question with
Okay.
submitting those photos.
All right, so I would have a question, and this is general, but does breaking the law, whether you're caught or not, make it right? And I guess that's something that we have to think about, you know.
Say that again, Marlene.
Does breaking the law, whether you're caught or not, make it right?
With all due respect,
I'm
when you say breaking the law, a
Okay.
violation was filed. There's been no adjudication at this point that
Okay.
anybody has broken the law. And in fact, it was recommended by the court, and you know I know that because my wife works there, it was recommended by the court that Mr. Anjo come here and seek a variance,
Yeah.
which happens very frequently in the town court. The judges would prefer to resolve this amicably. They don't want to do something like that.
I still would ask the question, if you know you're not doing something that is correct, if I run a stop sign, if I run over, you know, like, at what point am I right, and at what point,
Would you steal for your hungry kid?
probably not.
Yeah. Well,
Listen, if my
okay.
kid is starving, I would steal. Listen, I mean, look, I tried every other way.
I mean, I'm just,
that's the only way I can get in and out of the house without leaving an unattended car in Narragansett, running to get the other car, leaving that car unattended, and then putting the other one back. That's the only way.
the problem we have here,
but the problem, and again, the problem is this front yard parking is, I know it's your situation now as an officer who has a tenant who's a nurse, but it actually runs with the property, so if someone else lives there, they still have the right to park in the front yard, and,
But they're gonna have the same issue. I mean,
If you have a legal two-family house, you're going to have the same issue. Somebody is going to have a car that gets blocked in.
at
That's
all
the issue.
times.
that
It's
is,
the
One of the families is
configuration.
gonna be blocked in.
You're right, it's the configuration of the house on the lot with the way that the house juts out and that chain link fence which is right along the border. That's the issue. You're right, it does run with the property, and the property is what causes the need for the variance.
The other thing I also is, when you look at the zoning worksheet, it's indicated that by the village code, you have to create a minimum of 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit.
that's correct.
So that would be 4, and on the worksheet, it shows without the 2 parking spaces in the front, he has 4. This would create 6, correct?
Can I just say something? Four,
It's
you're,
just a question, is that
you're
correct?
including the garage,
No,
right?
it's not correct.
Well, that's what's
You
on
would
the
be
worksheet.
blocking him in.
We're not
The
talking
issue
about
is-
blocking, we're talking about the
Joe.
number of spaces.
Joe, you're including the garage, right? 2 garage, 2 outside, that's what you're saying? The garage is not big enough. You told me that a spot in Austin is 18 by 9. The garage, I measured it. It's,
So then the worksheet is incorrect, is what you're saying?
We will amend the worksheet, yes.
okay. We got a couple of things happening here. First of all, we're not in the right and wrong business, we're in the legal and illegal business. And they are not always the same thing, okay? In the Coast Guard, we have a rule. Never give an order that you have no expectation of being obeyed. If you've got a law on the books that is constantly being broken again and again and again, we need to look at the law. So I think we need to make a recommendation, if we're allowed to the village board, to have them relook at the law. Because if the whole neighborhood is getting violated for parking in the front of their house because there's no legal parking on the street, maybe there needs to be legal parking on the street, or maybe we need to change the law so that it's legal to put the car in your yard, since everybody's doing it anyway. And it seems to be taking up, these guys have been coming here How long was, when you come here
This
first
has
time?
been taking almost a year.
Almost a year of everybody's time. And you just violated a whole bunch of other people, which I'm guessing that the town judge is gonna send them here. And we're gonna have this
Or
revolving
they-
Well,
or they-
conversation again.
Actually, what you're suggesting is something that the village will be doing when they do a comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
But the
Already
fact
in
is, right now, this is what the law reads, so
I
the
get it.
board has to decide based on the law right now, do they wanna grant the variance or not? You can make suggestions to the board of trustees, but that's something that's gonna happen sometime in the future.
Mhm.
If it's an issue with the village as a whole, then they have to address that, but they haven't as of now.
Not at this time, I get it, you're doing your job. I would never say that you aren't. Not at all. In fact, the building department and the code enforcement people continue to do an extraordinary job. And it under more difficult circumstances all the time. I get it. I think that in this situation, since we've got 10 instances where we've already done it, and I know the danger from watching meetings is every time you give a variance, it's the danger of now the next guy's gonna come and say you did it for them. And then you did it for them, and you did it for them, and eventually,
But everyone should be taken in accordance with the law and the steps of looking at the 5, pieces of the pie that we have to look at to go forward. So we can't just, you're actually taking it as an individual case and not the broad case. So right now.
With all due respect, not to instruct you on the law, but I did this for quite a while. In an instance where front yard parking has been allowed, the board, if it determines that they're not going to grant the variance, has to indicate each individual reason why those are different, that the precedent that we've cited is different from this particular case.
That
Actually, would just think that they would need to go through
we
the
would need to go through
factors
the factors.
and show why those factors haven't been proven. I don't think they need to go through the 10 cases you've provided and show why those,
I didn't provide them. You guys provided them to us.
I didn't provide them, the village
I-
provided
The
them.
village provided them.
Okay, I don't think that we need to prove why those cases, which are all decided based on their facts, are different than your individual case, which is being decided on its own facts.
Well, we can disagree about the law, but I believe you need to distinguish why this case is different from cases that have already been granted.
Which I think they would do in
Based
going
on
through
the
the 5
five
factors.
George?
But I don't even know if the board is at that point yet.
I
I
don't
think the
think
board
so.
needs to decide, based on the fact that, partly because we have new members here, if they have enough information at this point to
To
even
make-
make a decision.
do you need any more information, Marlene?
We have new board members, so I
Yeah.
can't,
Well, I've been coming to the meetings in
okay,
September.
but I still think, George has been on the board a long time, I'd like to hear.
I've only been on the board 24 years.
Right, so that's why I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have the law and sometimes you have common sense. Personally, in my opinion, if you say how do I feel, I would vote to grant the variance because
Thank you, sir.
it's not that you're a police officer
I-
or whatever, that has nothing to do with it.
I know.
It's just that I've seen, they said they had 10, I'm sure I voted on all of them. And sometimes you have problems that are hard to solve, not because you created them, but because they were created for you
Yes.
previously. And I think this is one of those cases, there might be 10, but when you have 25 or 30,000 people here, that's not an overwhelming amount, and there's a special reason why. And even if you were not a police officer or something, you would have the same problem,
Yes, I would.
going to work, instead of saying I'm in different shifts and all that, and that's very nice, and I certainly appreciate it. But that doesn't bear into my thinking, okay? So, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Yes, and the last thing I want to do is stand here on television telling you guys my business and how problematic this is for my family.
No, I understand. That's
So
the
I
end of my
appreciate your
story.
kind words. Thank you.
I actually feel I need a little more information before I make a decision. I am new here, I do understand there were 10 prior cases. Did you annex any of the information from prior cases in your submission?
I did not, but I can. But we got these from the village. They're all decisions from the village ZBA.
Prior cases or prior boards.
I told you how I feel.
I would like to take a look at those prior cases before I render a decision.
So let me just
Before you're
to
done,
add a little bit,
Before you talk, you should probably let someone support you.
thank you.
Okay. I think that we should grant this variance. I think that based on, I read what was, all the information that was sent to me. I looked at the cases. I drove around because my wife says I put the hyphen in or attentive, I check everything. And I drove the neighborhood, there's cars in all the yards, okay? There's no reason if there's gonna be cars in any yards, there shouldn't be cars in his yard. And I think that we should grant the variance. In fact, unless there's a really good reason not to, anybody on Narragansett that gets cited for parking their car in the front of their yard should get the variance so they can park there until such time as they make it legal to park on that street. Because people have to put their cars somewhere, it's a physics problem. Everything has to be somewhere.
Especially there.
And so I would vote to approve this at this time.
Without taking a look at those prior cases, I would have to abstain from voting.
Well, I'll solve it for you. I'll make a motion to approve.
I second.
Well, wait a minute, if there's only 3 voting, do we
Yeah,
have to take
that's
a
all you
vote
need.
today? Because if they,
There's still a quorum with 3.
That would be a
I don't
quorum.
know.
but I don't know if they can request a waiver to have a full quorum to vote or not.
Well,
Because if one denies, then it's denied.
sure, if one denies, but I don't know what's gonna happen right now.
Mr. Griffith, I can provide you with those cases, but there'd be a while before you, I don't know if you can read them through tonight.
I think that, yeah.
Is it possible to ask for an adjournment till
Yes.
next month?
If I may add something to
I
this.
know his schedule may not allow him to come, for Mr. Angel to come back, but if Mr. Malone can come back without him, just so that, I would really like.
Yeah.
Kevin Griffith, listen, can I just say something to you before? I
Mr.
start talking.
Mr. Angel?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know if we could just put this off for 1 month to give Mr. Griffith.
But the problem is, I don't know where to put the cars, and he's gonna keep writing me.
So can we have a direction from this board that no violations will be issued until the next,
I don't think that's something.
I don't
think
think,
they
it's
can.
not our purview. We
They
can't do that.
We can't do that.
No.
No,
That's
we
not
oh
can't.
wait, this board adjourned our request only on the condition that nobody park in the front yard. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get to the lady who lives upstairs in time. But the bottom line is, that was a condition of the adjournment. Why can't there be a condition of the adjournment that no further violations will be filed?
Because they're not issuing violations, it's not their
It's
responsibility.
not our purview.
We don't make the law.
Right. And we don't enforce the law.
I think you can make a recommendation that the building department not file any further violations until you have an opportunity to have a vote on this matter. Otherwise, we're just going back and forth to court. You're gonna have Judge Twill or one of the other
But
judges.
I mean, the subject of the application is parking in the front yard, which is prohibited by the code.
Which is why Stuart had given a notice to yourself and to your client to abstain from parking in the front yard until a decision was
I mean,
made by the board.
I can talk to Stuart.
All we're asking is that he not get dinged for, I understand, we want to provide the information and the materials, particularly to Mr. Griffith.
I really like Mr. Griffith to be on board
Yeah.
before we make this decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not your
And
fault
also
that
think
we're all
Antonio
new.
really would like to weigh in on this also, so I would like to be able to,
I would support, do we need to have a motion to withdraw, to table the motion till next month?
we need a motion to table the motion to.
All right, I motion to table the motion till next month.
I think you just can just
You
withdraw the
second.
motion.
We can just withdraw the motion
This is for
and
you.
ask for.
Second.
And motion to adjourn the application.
Motion to adjourn the application until next month.
Seconded.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to Stuart about.
And then, and Mr. Angelo, I know your working schedule may not permit you to be here, but if Mr. Malone can just come in your place. By that time, everyone, because again, we have other board members that would like to bring up to this, and I like, our newest board members to really be on top of the reason why we're making this decision, okay? Nothing against you, but I think we're moving forward in a space, and especially with brand new board members that have not everybody's on top of, what's going on.
Yeah, I was just gonna tell them, there's, like I said before, there's a very similar house on Narragansett. Very similar, multi-family, with the garages, with the parking outside. I don't know the law stuff, but he was granted that in 2012. The same street, the same situation.
Are you talking about
It's the same-
48?
48, I'm sorry.
It's in the supplement.
It's-
I'll
yeah,
provide a copy of
yeah.
that.
Okay, if
It's
we could just
very,
provide-
very similar. I mean, like, it's like almost like a no-brainer, like, that guy got it, very similar circumstances.
Okay,
We got it.
we got it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Mr. Malone, we'll see you next month.
Very good, thank you.
ZBA number 2519, 31 Paris Avenue. Is anyone here to speak on that?
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman. I don't do this that often, and board members. My name is John Power, 24 Van Wyck Street, Croton-on-Hudson, New York. I'm the architect for this project, although I point out I'm just representing the client regarding the property at 31 Ferris, which is a two-family. And inadvertently, I didn't design this parking arrangement. A section of the rear yard was paved over to provide parking. We're talking a lot about parking this evening. Parking for tenants. The space, and my guess, and I only met the client after this was done, that tenants were parking on the grass in the rear of this property, and probably became a problem regarding erosion. So they inadvertently, without consulting a professional, paved over a section that would allow for 4 parking spaces in the rear. That brings the total of parking spaces to this property 5. And as similar to the previous situation, the house was built before any regulations and such, so it does create, there is a tight space to get around the house and to this parking. So what this does is allow for each individual space or car to leave on their own volition without removing or moving cars around. The problem with the paving, it unfortunately exceeded the impervious coverage allowed, which is the 40%. So the computations figures that it has exceeded by 9.6%. Okay. This is the second time coming to the board for the variance, and the initial presentation had just the paving, and I was documenting what was done. But during that first hearing in December, the neighbor to the south, the property owner, had expressed concern about the amount of paving and had stated that during a good rain, a good downpour, that water was perhaps entering his property.
Drainage.
Yes.
Drainage issue.
So my first suggestion to the client was, there's two suggestions. First one was, to avoid the variance, you could rip up that paving situation and provide a pervious paver where rainwater would pass through. But I know that these systems, number one, the removal, and then the installation of these pavers can be, quite expensive. So my second suggestion was to provide, to leave everything in place and to extend what is, if you see the photographs, extend what is a curve down the side of the property to extend that to the end of what is really that extra 50 feet in the plan there. That was existing paving already. And really, that extra section up there is, in the middle of the yard, is the portion that was, the additional paving. So the proposal now is to get the variance, but with the promise of providing a curb to prevent any drainage or any water that falls on this impervious surface, and then to direct it to a dry well situation that was well within the center of the property. So that's where we're.
The only thing I also recall in the last meeting was that the neighbor also claimed that all this additional parking that was needed is because he claimed that the house was overcrowded. And on the application, they wrote this as one dwelling unit, but yet are asking for 5 parking spaces.
Right.
And I don't know if it's
Well, it's a fair
allowed or not,
question.
but the question was, and I believe you were gonna ask your clients were if, before they granted a variance, if they were willing to allow the building department to do an inspection of their home.
Okay.
They weren't here, I believe, the last.
Well, they weren't here, and I've been this is the owner, direct owner. I've been communicating with the owner's daughter, who has better communication skills and perhaps,
It's very simple. How many people live in the house?
well, I believe it is a two-family, correct?
I don't know, it's on the application, it says number of dwelling units,
One. The one-family house.
It says here.
Which,
So maybe,
So it's not a legal two-family,
it's not a legal two-family.
so that makes a difference.
oh,
And
well,
unless
that's,
we can inspect and find out the truth,
Yeah.
I'm certainly
no,
not
it's,
gonna vote.
I mean, that's probably, that's a
doesn't-
mistake on my part, not knowing anything about this property when I got involved with just to rectify this paving
Well, you
situation.
can understand our concern.
Yeah,
Are we allowed
And
to
it's-
make
and
that?
I
very
think it
large.
is a two-family. I'm pretty
Can you
sure it's
make
a
that
two-family.
a
So that's-
requirement that before we grant a variance, that the home be inspected?
It's an illegal variance.
Right.
If it's a two-family house.
There's a question, but I don't know, is that are we allowed to require that the building department inspect to see how many people are living in the home, and that it's a legal two-family? Can we do that?
Of course you can.
Fine.
Because if we can do that, I'd like to propose that. And then after that's been done, then we can address this with the facts that we need to make a proper decision.
Yeah.
Joe, what do you think of that? Because you're a guy.
I'm okay with that,
So-
if you're saying that can be made as a condition, then it's,
Do we need a motion on that, Marlene?
Yes, we would need a
Applicant
motion.
wants
So
to-
the motion,
The motion on,
if it is a two-family house,
if it's a
So what
legal
are you trying to
two-family
say? What
house,
kind of motion
Well-
are you trying to make?
the motion that I'd like to make is that before this body will make a decision on the variance, there needs to be an inspection by the building department to determine how many people live in the building.
that's not a
That's not a
motion.
motion.
So we just,
Request more
we'll
information.
request more information.
Yeah.
My-
Oh, it's a request for information,
Yeah.
so we want to request that.
I think it was that they adjourned at the last meeting
Because
to allow the architect to speak to his clients about, before we came back for the next meeting, this one,
Yeah.
if they were gonna give permission for us to do that inspection so we could advise the board of what we saw.
Yes.
Now, I've been communicating to the client that they needed to arrange this, but apparently they never
We
did.
can do that right now. Here he is, there you are, arrange it.
So then there's nobody here that can tell me it's a it is a legal two-family,
Not without being looked at.
Right.
not without being looked at? I mean, section and block and lot number, Joe, you can't tell me that this is a legal two-family?
Well,
Yeah,
that's-
yes,
Even though I put one family on.
The assessor's office assesses the property classes based on what their assumptions are of a property. So the only way for us to determine is whether we have an actual C of O for the house,
Okay,
which we did not come across one to see if it was CO'd as a one-family or two-family. Or we would go to the property and verify what it is, and then we could record it properly, and then advise the board that it's a legal two-family
Okay.
observe it.
Great.
all right.
Well,
So they're here now.
Right.
They were away. They're here now.
So what,
She claims that on January 29th, there was a building inspection that happened.
Okay, I believe they made an attempt to come to the property, but they were told by the tenants that they were not allowed in.
有啊，我有开门啊，我有开门啊，已经开门进去看了，已经看了第二个是
well, they're
几号？
talking. Can you schedule a thing right now?
Yeah,
Like
she
2
said
days
that,
time?
she said that like she let you guys in.
你
You
去
can do it
看
after
了，
the meeting.
Hmm?
Do it
我
after.
还在啊，
Just what
有啊都有啊
Yeah, she-，
全部还有去纠纷那边阁楼都有走啊，
She claims that she let you guys in for the inspection.
Who, what is, did they inspect the entire house?
全部都看了吗？
全部都看了是，
And do you know who the individual was?
你知道谁看的吗
是一，我不知道他名字啊，
？She doesn't know the name.
Well, we don't know the name either then, so we don't know anything
他还
about
照
it.
相啊，他还全部照相。
She says that he also took pictures.
But you
I
don't
think
know who-
for all I know that maybe, you know, the tax assessor is also going around doing
Yeah, that's
assessments.
And I was gonna say that.
2点下午2点
The tax assessors are going around too.
that could have been them.
They could- Especially if they were taking.
They, yeah, they came to my house.
Were they in the house? Were they in the house?
Who?
You.
When they came?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they knocked on my door. I said, come on in. I made them a cup of coffee.
No, I'm just, you know.
Alright,
So
well, I think
maybe
this
what
is
they
still
can
an
do is
open
adjourn
issue.
it.
Yeah, I think
Don't
we should
worry, I'm
adjourn.
not going to-
And request that this issue be addressed with the building inspector.
Yeah.
So I would need a motion to adjourn this issue until next month, just so that we can get more information to figure out if this is a one-family house, a two-family house. And we also need to know, you know, they need to meet with the building inspector to get everything straight before we can actually make a motion to either grant or deny this.
So moved.
2点，下午
I did.
2点。
So it needs to be seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so this would be adjourned until next month.
But tell the people here, I think, and I think we're all on the same page, that we're not comfortable knowing all the, let's say, the details. And until we know the details, it's very hard to make a decision.
Okay, so-
And by just an inspection, it would answer the question, is it a one-family or a two-family?
Right.
And it would give us a confidence to go forward if what you say or didn't say, you know, we don't know. And until that gets solved, your problem will not be solved here.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Right.
So,
Okay.
once again, Joe, can I just ask if the attorney can come, if the family is unable to come, because I know that there was some,
Yeah.
As long as they
I'm the
have, give us
architect.
I mean, the
access.
architect, I'm sorry.
As long as they're granting access for us to do this.
Okay, so that by the next meeting, we should have, hopefully, that
So-
resolved.
You need to arrange
Yeah.
through Joe.
Here in the next
Do you have a
meeting,
card?
take a look at the calendar.
Okay.
Yes.
没有啊。
I thought this was going to
So
be
you'll call
done.
Joe, and the inspection will happen, and then
Yes.
next month, we can look at this.
Okay.
Okay?
什么时候？
Next month可能是大家 schedule 一下。
Just tell them.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Great.
Is there any new business on the board?
Thank you.
No.
小鸡字头，给
Is there any-
Gary。
Oh, we have to approve, you have to approve the minutes from the January meeting.
29号，
Is there someone named Gary in that office?
He's a code enforcement officer.
What's the name? Code in it. She says that he's the one.
So what we'll do is, let me, even if they're operating as a two-family, we like to take it and compare it to whatever records we have to make sure that it's been even granted legally as a two-family. So if by the time we come back next month, I'll be able to do all the research and get it right, so I can tell the board what it is.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Will be part of yours. No, that's not true.
那是
I'm just gonna tell him to keep it. Is there any new business of the board?
Do we
You-
approve the minutes?
Do you approve minutes yourself, or do you take a vote on them?
I think last time I just signed them.
On what, the minutes?
Minutes.
Just say, does anybody
Is
have
there
any
any,
questions?
any
I
questions?
don't.
No.
Issues
If
about
there's
the-
none, then,
Okay, can I get a motion
Boards
to
do it
approve?
differently.
yeah,
To approve the minutes from the January 14th, 2020 meeting?
Sure.
so move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Can I get a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All of us.
Look at that.
Motion
Half an
carried.
hour. Oh, an hour.
Not quite.